Hello friends, and welcome to the first episode of the channel. And today's episode we have Dr. Nadia Hansa, who's a qualified vet and also currently doing her CCS, which is the compulsory community service year. Nadia, welcome to the channel, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm glad you could make it. I'm glad we could actually shoot the video. And on today's show, we're actually speaking about dog fighting, more so in the South African context, and she's gonna share with us her experience and all the things that she's learned along the way. And I'm excited for today's episode and today's conversation because I think there's a lot of misinformation, and also a lot of people don't really know much in terms of dog fighting, that it's legal and what to do about it, all those sort of stuff. So Nadia, before we start, I just want to get to know you a bit better, just to tell us where you're from and also why did you study vet?
Okay, so I'm from Joburg. I've lived there my whole life, and I studied vet because I've always wanted to work with animals. I've always wanted to do things in rescue with animals. Nice. And welfare, and I found that without a veterinary degree that was quite limited. So I decided to become a vet to expand my options.
Ah, nice. So did you do something before studying, basically?
I did. I studied zoology degrees straight out of school.
Okay.
And I did my honours, and then I worked for 6 years. I did 1 year on Marion Island, and then 5 years at the National SPCA.
Oh, okay, that's nice. So you've been in the industry for a while before actually coming back and studying?
Yes. I don't recommend studying later in life, but yes.
Yeah, I can imagine. Was it a big change from working to going back to school, especially doing like a challenging degree like veterinary science?
Yeah, it was a very big change, and you lose a lot of your freedoms because obviously time's a lot more limited, but it's a very big change in lifestyle. And as you get older, it's a lot harder to learn new things.
Okay, I can imagine. I struggle with languages because I like learning languages, and like now that I'm older, it takes me longer to learn more languages, so I can relate in that sense. I can imagine doing another degree might be a bit challenging. And so you worked at SPCA for 5 years?
Yes.
Okay. And then would you say SPCA is where you want to go back now that you've qualified, or your time there is sort of up?
I think I've done my time there. I'd still like to work in welfare, but I think I'd like to work in a bit of a different sector of welfare. I'd still like to work in animal law enforcement. Okay. But I think maybe in a slightly different capacity.
Aspect. Okay, yeah. Nice. And then how was the Marion Islands?
It was a big adventure.
Yeah.
1 year of total isolation with only 20 people on an island and no way to get off. So it was quite an adventure.
I can imagine. That must have been exciting and everything.
Yeah.
And by the way, this is Mouse.
This is Mouse.
Joining us for the show. Yeah, okay, that's pretty cool. Coming back to the conversation we're speaking about today, which is dog fighting. How did you actually get involved? Was it through the SPCA, I'm assuming?
Yes, yeah. So okay. I worked in the Special Investigations Unit.
Okay.
My boss in the Special Investigations Unit, my direct supervisor, was a friend of mine from previous, when I'd been volunteering as a kid. Okay. And she was very good at law enforcement, and it was something I'd always wanted to do. I'd always wanted to be a police officer, actually, and I just never followed that dream. So now I became... Yes.
I'd say polar opposites.
So now I became an animal police officer.
Okay, nice.
And got involved in that, yeah. And that's how
you got involved. Okay, cool. And then in your time at SPCA, I'm assuming that you went on a few dog fighting busts in that way.
Yeah. We were one of the most successful, I think, in the world, to be honest, one of the more successful units. Okay. We had a lot of busts. We did some active dog fights, and then quite a lot of raids on yards where people were keeping fighting dogs, or dogs that were used for dog fighting.
Okay, I see, nice. And then when you speak of dog fighting, what would you say like the history behind it?
Sure.
It goes a long way.
It goes a long way. So dog fighting started in Europe in like the Middle Ages. I mean, animal fights go back all the way to Roman times when animals were fought in the Colosseum and gladiator fights and stuff like that. But dog fighting sort of started to become popular more in about the 1800s, because at that stage England in particular banned the fights against large animals. So
Okay.
they used to pit dogs against bears and bulls and bigger animals like that. So they banned all of the fights, but it's a lot easier to hide dogs than it is to hide a bear in your yard.
Makes sense. Yeah, I think it's
So that's why it sort of gained popularity more as a dog fighting thing.
okay.
And then when people moved to America, in that sort of time where immigration was quite a big thing, they often took their dogs with them. And then once they were in America, the dog fighting took real hold and became a very popular sport.
Okay. And I guess it's like a blood sport, basically.
Yeah, it's a very nasty blood sport because it's very premeditated.
Sure.
It takes a lot of pre-planning and thought and breeding of dogs, especially in its higher levels.
Okay.
And the dogs are very, very brutally injured throughout the fights. Yeah.
Okay. And then speaking of breeding dogs, the dog that's mostly used is the pit bull, right? But then there's a lot of breeding that goes in and identifying fighting dogs and stuff like that.
Yes, so in South Africa and America and most of Europe, the American Pit Bull Terrier, to be specific, is the dog of choice.
Okay.
Pit Bull is kind of a broad term to describe all Pit Bull type dogs.
Yeah.
But the American Pit Bull Terrier is the actual breed of dog
I see.
that is used mostly in dog fighting. In other countries around the world, such as China and Russia, other dogs are sometimes used, and sometimes in like India and other parts of Asia, they use different breeds of dog.
Okay, nice. Okay, I guess you learn something new every day. So pit bull is more of a broad term.
Yeah.
I remember someone saying that when they say most pit bulls are responsible for like the dog bites that we see, is because they group up all the pit sort of breeds into one big.
Yeah. So an actual fighting pit bull is very much not what most people expect it to be.
Okay.
So most people think the big, tough, strong, muscular, heavy-set dogs are the fighting dogs. But in reality, those dogs, like a boxer, they're more like WWE wrestlers, they're these big, strong things. But if you actually put them in a real fight, they're not going to have the stamina to push through. So a real pit bull, or a real American Pit Bull Terrier, is a much smaller dog. They're very lean, very muscular, but in a lean sort of way, like so like a lightweight boxer.
Okay, because they want the endurance.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm guessing the fights go on for hours.
They can range, obviously, if a dog gets killed very quickly, then they can be very short, but some of the dogs the fights do go on for 2 to 3 hours at a time.
So they go until the dogs die, basically, or?
So there are many different sets of rules around the world that dog fights are run by. South Africa in particular uses what's called Cajun rules. And Cajun rules is a particularly brutal set of rules because they say that the dogs go until one of the dogs quits fighting. So in others where it is until there is an obvious winner, this goes until either the owner decides to pull the dog out of the fight or the dog is unable to continue.
Sure, that is intense and very brutal for the poor animals that are actually going through this. And so going back to the breeds, you mentioned that they are leaner and then they're not as bulky and all this. So the pit bulls we see in most houses, they are not fighting dogs, they are probably crossbred and all those things.
I wouldn't say that crossbred. There's obviously, because dog fighting has been banned now for a very long time, less dogs are purpose-bred for fighting and more dogs are bred for sort of show conditions, same as with any other breed.
Like a show dog.
So the bigger dogs are often more show dogs, more sometimes mixed with guard dogs. A crossbreed pit bull is quite a dangerous thing, but also can be quite a dangerous thing. But a lot of the larger pit bulls are purebred pit bulls, but they're just not of fighting bloodlines.
Okay, so it makes sense. And then if someone wants to see or suspect that a dog's being used for dog fighting, like you're saying it is banned, what steps can one person take if for whatever reason you can see that your neighbor's dog or someone in the neighborhood or area you stay has a pit bull, and you see that most likely that the pit bull could be used for dog fighting, what steps would you take?
Firstly, I would encourage somebody obviously not to get too involved that they put themselves at risk.
Okay.
But some form of proof or evidence would make a world of difference to people investigating it.
Okay.
So if they can safely get a photograph or a video of the dogs fighting, or even just a picture of the dog to show that it has scars or injuries, that would be first prize.
Okay.
And if not, then at least as much detailed information as they can manage. So like descriptions of the dog, color, size, markings, injuries, breed, and well, not so much breed because there will always be pit bulls, but sex and that sort of stuff.
Okay. And then who would they report it to?
So the NSPCA would be a good starting point, or their local SPCA would be a good starting point.
Okay.
And then any of the animal welfares would hopefully step in and respond. Yeah.
Okay. And then there's obviously markings that one identifies on the dog that you'd see for dog fighting. On the face, more or less, and
so there's a very specific scar pattern to fighting dogs in the way that they get injured, because there are two dogs that are actively attacking each other. Okay. They often have less injuries on the back half of their body and more injuries on their legs and their face and their chest.
Okay.
And the injuries can be very severe, but once they've healed, they often don't look like that much. So you have to be quite aware of looking for scars and injuries on the body.
And that's like more something where someone has to be experienced and obviously...
Yes, but it would always be very helpful. So a lot of vets, I think, miss fighting dog wounds that come into their clinics because they maybe don't suspect that, they maybe don't suspect the person, or they don't know what they're looking for. So to vets in particular, it would be helpful for them to recognize those wounds. Yeah,
because I mean, if a dog comes into the clinic saying it's a dog bite, I say, my dogs were fighting, and then you just treat it like
as if two accidental bites.
But it actually could be a potential dog fighting dog that came through the clinic without you knowing, and I'm assuming that these fighting dogs are worth a lot of money, so they'll probably take care of them.
They're certainly, their bloodlines are worth a lot of money. So the dog themselves, yes, but also their puppies and the bloodline is worth quite a bit, especially on the higher levels of dog fighting.
Nice.
So often they don't bring the dogs into vets for majority of treatments because they don't want to get caught. But sometimes they will and pass it off, as you say, an accidental fight, or perhaps the dog comes in for something completely unrelated, like say tick bite fever or biliary or something like that. And just being able to recognize the scars on the dog sort of should bring up a red flag and be something that should be.
Yeah, I guess I also need to start learning and teaching myself to identify these things so that I can actually start making a difference. And you're saying that now, since it's been banned, there's been a drop of more or less.
Well, dogfighting's been banned in South Africa technically dogfighting's been banned in South Africa since the 60s. But the law that specifically speaks to dogfighting was added to the Animals Protection Act in the early 90s. But it wasn't enforced very often and for a very long time.
I see.
Yeah, but now that we've enforced it a lot, it is something that has hopefully taken a bit of a decline.
Okay, that's good. That's good. I mean, I think it's something, it would be nice if we can eradicate it completely, but
it would be.
Probably going to take a lot of work and some time before we get to the stage.
And people always find a new way to
do something.
Deal with that bloodlust,
Yeah, okay. It's unfortunate, but it's the human condition sometimes that we have to deal with. And then from the time that you were at NSPCA, I said it correctly. From the time you were there, you said you guys had, from what you understand, one of the most successful units and all those things. Is there any story that you can remember of
we had so many.
I'm glad that you actually found so many, but it's sad.
It's sad, but I've always felt that so long as you're trying to help and you're doing something and actually making a difference, then even though it's horrible to see, it's worth seeing it because you are doing something about it and fixing the problem. So yeah, we had many a raid. It was always fun to go chasing people. Sometimes on the different levels of dogfighting, sometimes there's sort of three main levels. There's the street fighters who are very disorganized. It's just like, my dog's better than yours, let's see. It's often related to gangs and to other things as well, and it's just sort of an afternoon pastime. And then your hobbyists sort of still train the dogs and actually have dogs specifically for dog fighting, but they might not be of very valuable bloodlines, and they might not stick to the rules exactly like the higher levels do. And then the high levels, they like stick to the rules completely, and their dogs are very bred, line bred specifically for dog fighting. So it's always a different experience each time, you know, when you're busting a lower level thing, it's a chase through the veld, and when you're doing a higher level thing, it's a very organized, premeditated crime that you're coming in on, where there's an actual pit and so on.
And then the dogs that you find in these raids, are they aggressive towards humans?
Not at all.
Or so you just handle them?
Even I mean, we once raided an active fight where two of the dogs were still in the pit and fighting with each other. And I mean, they're actively trying to kill each other, you know, and I climbed into the pit, and each of us grabbed the dog, and you put things into their mouths to pull them apart. And I mean, you're handling a dog, you're almost in its mouth, and they show no interest on turning on a human in any way, shape.
So just shows like they were specifically bred.
They are bred specifically to attack dogs. And in fact, proper pit bulls and fighting pit bulls are bred not to ever attack a human. They actually make terrible guard dogs because they're so friendly towards humans, but very aggressive towards other animals.
And then because in that situation, I guess when you actually rescue some of these dogs, it becomes a challenge now in terms of rehoming them and managing them after that.
It's very difficult because firstly, obviously pit bulls have very bad press, so people are very scared of them sometimes. Well, the right people are very scared of them sometimes. And then they are very animal aggressive. So there do have to be certain rules. Like, it's very difficult to rehome a fighting dog with another dog. They generally have to be only dogs, except in very sort of specific and individual conditions. And they can't be with cats, and they need proper walling because they're very athletic dogs, so they're quite capable of jumping a high fence. And you wouldn't want an aggressive dog to get to the Yorkie next door, you know, like that would be a very bad result. So you do have to be very careful on rehoming, which makes it difficult, and finding somebody who both wants to put all that effort in and put all that management in, and somebody who meets all the criteria is very difficult.
Which makes sense because you wouldn't just want to give it to any random person who doesn't have it.
Certainly don't want to also rescue a dog from dog fighting and then rehome it to somebody who's going to do exactly the same thing.
Shame, man. It is quite sad what they do. And like you say, they always find another blood spot or something to quench the bloodthirst that they have. Have you seen any like chicken fighting or whatever?
It's not as common in South Africa, but we have seen it once or twice, but it's not a very common sport. Honestly, I don't know how people find it, but there's always something new to fight. Somewhere in India, I think, they do sheep fighting.
I've seen all the rams run.
Where the rams run at each other. There's chicken fighting is a fairly normal blood sport. I mean, it's very horrible because the birds almost always die. But that's something that's very popular, especially in like South America and Southeast Asia.
I see.
But there's also other things like horse fighting and all sorts of weird wonderful things.
Crazy things that people can get up to. I don't know if is it from being bored or what.
So dogfighting is one of the more serious crimes that you can get in animal abuse. So animal abuse is broadly divided into passive and active abuse. Passive abuse is crimes of neglect. So just failing to feed a dog or leaving it outside in the cold, all of those sort of things. Often, most of the time that is because of lack of education.
Yeah.
Most of the time you can educate someone
About
to
that,
change
yeah.
that. Sometimes people do it deliberately,
Yeah.
but it's still an act of neglect. But dogfighting and other crimes similar to it are acts of active animal abuse.
Yeah,
so it's an active decision to cause harm to an animal. And that active abuse is far more dangerous. And an act like dogfighting, which is particularly a premeditated act of animal abuse, is far more dangerous still.
Sure.
And it has huge impacts on the community in many different ways. So it is seen internationally as both an indicator and a predictor crime.
Okay.
So it's an indicator of concurrent crimes in the community, so of violent crime in particular in the community, and it is a predictor of future violent crimes, both for the person perpetrating the dogfighting and for the community as a whole. So one of the things that we saw, which is probably one of the most horrible things I'd seen, was a school out on the Far East Strand, where the kids had been exposed to dogfighting. So they were young kids from like the ages of 9 to 14, that sort of age range. And their older brothers or their sort of mentors, young mentors in the community had started getting involved in dogfights. And were showing them dogfights. And obviously these kids didn't have dogs themselves to fight with. So they were taking the younger kids and making them pretend to be dogs. And they were physically attacking each other in this like role-playing game as dogs. And doing it so badly that they actually sent kids to hospital with bite wounds and stitches from
the kids
fighting with each other. And the level of violence in the school went from these fairly well-behaved young children to one of the kids attacking their teacher with a 9-inch roofing nail.
Insane.
So that kind of like violence that escalates because of teaching a child about empathy is an important thing. And empathy towards animals is the start of empathy towards other people.
True.
And if you erode that empathy, then these children become very violent towards other people as well.
That is quite sad, and like you're saying, the how dogfighting can actually affect the lives of these young children growing up, and how it's actually a predictor of crime and violence in the area. Wow, that is quite sad. I'm glad that we're actually doing this just to bring more awareness about it, and that more people can know that it's actually an active act of crime that needs to be reported.
And even especially in South Africa, where we have quite strong community bonds, sometimes it is hard to prosecute a fighting case. I mean, it's definitely possible and it's very doable, and I would encourage any vets or any welfare organizations who might listen to this to take it upon themselves and do it. It is possible. With guidance and some work, you can definitely prosecute it. The groundwork has been laid for them. But it takes a long time, to get from arrest to conviction. And honestly, often, especially for the lower levels of dogfighting, just the community standing up and saying, we will not tolerate this in our community is enough to stop it. And especially because it's often teenagers or kids who start getting involved in it. If the community sort of clamps down on it and says no,
not doing it,
then it's enough to stop it and actually really prevent it from growing.
Okay, that's encouraging to hear that. And like you say, the communities actually have to step up and also decide if they not decide, but make the decision to say this is not something we accept, because it's affecting the future generations to come. Thank you so much, Nadia. I think this is such an important conversation to have, a lot of knowledge that you're sharing with us and teaching us as well as vets to look out for such things and report these things to the necessary bodies, just so we can try and make a difference in some way or another.
Remember, as a vet, you have a lot more power than sometimes you think you have. You have the authority to make these calls and to actually see these things, and don't ignore it. It's the most important thing.
Okay. Thanks a lot. I think the audience will actually definitely enjoy this it was a lot of learning that we spoke about today. I learned a lot of stuff from this conversation, and I think those watching will also pick up a thing or two.
I hope it helps some people and some dogs. So.
Yeah, do it for the dogs, guys. Like it's a blood sport. We just do it to watch dogs actually bleed more or less to death and torture each other. Thank you so much, Nadia, for coming and doing this episode. I think it was like I said before, a very educational one, and I'm grateful that we could actually find the time to speak about this.
Thank you for the invite. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. And then before we head out, what's your vet tip for the day for those listening out there? Report dog fighting.
Well, yes, report dog fighting, please. But I suppose the one thing that you could possibly learn from the dog fighters, maybe we should say that, is that their dogs are always, well, not always, but often in very good physical condition.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of pet owners don't keep their dogs in such good physical condition.
Yeah.
And to a degree, it's a lot healthier to keep your dogs fit and healthy, not overweight.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So we shouldn't overfeed our dogs.
Yes. And I always say to people, don't try and cut out the treats, because nobody cuts out the treats. They always want to give the dogs the treats.
Yeah.
So just decrease the food a little bit, and then you can still give your treats.
Let's live healthy lives, including our dogs and cats at home.
Yes.
Alright, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed it and learned as much as I did. See you on the next one.